Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to another episode of 2 Minute Emergency. I am your host, Dr. Leslie, board certified emergency physician, best-selling author, international speaker, and professional photographer. And I bring you these 2 minute emergencies to help keep you healthy, safe, and out of the emergency department. So I am so glad that you were able to join me today. Today's topic is Lyme disease. So, why am I talking about Lyme disease? Well, Lyme disease is the number one vector borne illness in the United States. It actually occurs, they're estimating at 467,000 cases each year. Most of those cases are in the Northeast part of the country. They can actually happen in every state. And what is Lyme disease? Have you heard of it before? Lyme disease is carried by a particular disease or a particular bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi. I hope I said that properly in Italian. What it is it's carried on ticks. They are the main vector and usually by deer. So if you have deer in your neighborhood, and I know they're here in Texas, I'm from Pennsylvania, they were everywhere in Pennsylvania, it is likely that you have possibility of being exposed to Lyme disease. So Lyme disease typically starts as the symptoms that are just commonplace for most illnesses. You get fever, you get headache, fatigue, body aches, joint aches, and that is treated in the first stages by doxycycline. Well, there's several antibiotics that can be used, but doxycycline is the most common. Now, as opposed to that, from that initial stage, which is anywhere from 3 to 30 days after the tick is in you, up until other phases. And this is where we have a little bit more problems. So you can get neurologic manifestations of Lyme disease. Now, I mentioned the headache, but you can also get things like stiff neck, sensitivity to light. You can have areas of your body that feel sharp shooting pains. And you have no idea where these are coming from. It can even cause you to have meningitis. So we're talking about inflammation of the covering of the brain, make you very ill. Now, as I said, these are a little bit later. These aren't in those first few days of being bitten by a tick, but they can easily happen. Now, the treatment is still the same antibiotics that we would use any other time. But the third stage, that's potential or later stages, can get even worse, because Lyme disease can also not only affect the brain, as I mentioned, but they can also affect the heart and cause you, once it gets into that heart muscle, the bacteria itself can cause you to have, it can interrupt the signal, the electrical signal that goes through the heart. And that can cause you to have palpitations and irregular heart rhythms. So affects you a lot of different ways. And the last, which happens many times as well, is it can cause Lyme arthritis. And this is where you have not only the inflammation of the joints, but also swelling and long-term pain. Now, Lyme disease is treatable. The majority of the cases resolve completely with just the basic antibiotics, as I said before. And most of the time they're oral antibiotics, but in more serious cases, we move to IV antibiotics. And how do we discover someone has Lyme disease in the first place? Well, we look at the symptoms that they're having, and we also look to see what other manifestations there might be, whether the person has been exposed to ticks. We think about the time frame from that exposure to the ticks. And lastly, there are laboratory tests that we can use for confirmation. So all of this is part of figuring out about Lyme disease. So actually, when I speak about those neurologic symptoms, statistics say that 9 out of every 100 cases have those neurologic symptoms. And when the neurologic symptoms, in addition to those shooting pains and things that I was mentioning, it can mimic a stroke. So you can actually have a facial droop that looks like a stroke or Bell's palsy. And that is something, obviously, we would want to investigate right away and see what's going on, because there's a big difference in the treatment between the Lyme disease and you having a stroke. Other things that can happen, you can also have cases where you have the palpitations, as I mentioned, you can have dizziness associated with it. So Lyme disease is nothing to sneeze at, and it's out there. Right now, as our summers are winding down, we're getting into fall, especially if you live in the Northeast, you want to go out hiking, you want to go enjoy nature. So what can you do to prepare yourself? Well, first of all, you want to put on insect repellent. Now, a lot of things have been said about different insect repellents, which are safe, which aren't. The primary one we use for ticks is called permethrin. And you could actually buy clothes that are already infused with permethrin, specifically for people who are going to be out hiking or be out in the outdoors in areas where ticks are more abundant. Another thing you want to do is make sure that you protect your animals because your pets, once they are bitten, they can be affected, same as people. And actually, the treatment is similar. One of my dogs one time did get Lyme disease and treated it with doxycycline just like people. But that same tick can then release itself from the dog, and what's to say it can't go after you next? So, by protecting our animals, we're also protecting ourselves. And you also want to protect your surroundings. So, if you have a yard, you want to make sure that you use in your landscaping deer resistant uh, bushes and things like that. So you're not attracting the deer onto your property. You want to make sure that you give if you have a lot of vegetation or overgrowth, bushes, things like that, you want to make sure that they stay further away from the areas where you would normally conduct your social activities or enjoy your everyday. So just some basic things to help protect you. I hope you learned a little bit about Lyme disease today, and I hope that information is helpful to you in the future because I want to keep you healthy, safe, and out of the emergency department. Once again, I'm Dr. Leslie, board certified emergency physician, best-selling author, international speaker, and professional photographer. And I bring you these tips each week. And if you want to find out more about my other tips, I will always refer you to find me at www.drlesliesharp.com, or you can find me on all social media under Dr. Leslie Sharp. Until next time, be well.